Welcome to Death and Aliens, an in-depth look at horror and sci-fi TV from two cousins who vaguely know what they're doing. I'm MK.
And I'm Monica.
And, this week, I feel like I did things, but I didn't.
I know what you mean. This week was I felt like you were doing stuff for yourself in a sense. It wasn't like anything super insanely new or exciting.
Oh, just kidding.
But...
I definitely, I went to a bonfire on Saturday night, and I went to the lake on Sunday,
Yeah,
and
you're
then
lucky.
I went to work yesterday. I actually did do things this week. I was like, why do I feel like I did things? Because I did.
I didn't really do a whole lot of stuff this week. Kept it on the down low. I just been, healing with my messed up jaw still. As you can tell, I a little bit more back into being a little bit more comfortable from when we filmed on Saturday.
She's comfortable enough to be complaining again about fucking everything.
Yup. I haven't been able to do it for a week, and I think it's fair that I can complain again.
Find someone else to complain to.
That's why I got a boyfriend.
I'd say for an emotional support Hufflepuff, you are really annoying.
That is very true. That's why Cody's my emotional support Hufflepuff.
Yeah, so this week, it is, obviously, if you are watching this, Father's Day.
Mm-hmm. Good job to all the dads out there.
Yay, dads. My Father's Day gift to my dad is this really cute travel mug that says, "Dad, even when things get really hard, at least none of your kids are ugly."
Nice. Nice.
So there's that.
I don't get to see my dad, so I didn't get him anything.
You could mail it to him.
Well, I haven't thought of anything to mail to him. I haven't bought anything for anyone.
See, shopping for Father's Day is really hard when your dad is not the kind of person where, grill tools and power tools and fishing rods, I was, on Amazon, and it was, Father's Day gifts, and it was, grill aprons and, drill sets, and, my dad is the most intellectual human being I know, and, there's only so many books and coffee mugs I can give him.
Yeah.
I feel like every year for every gift, it's either, a weird sci-fi video game collectible that he really doesn't need any more of,
Mm-hmm.
or a book or a coffee mug.
That's fair. See, for my stepdad, it normally just goes, "Here, what's the most obscure Sabres item I can find?"
Well, for your dad, it's just what has he not already spent $600 on?
Exactly. I still have a gift for him that I've been waiting to get him sitting in my room. I just haven't seen him in 2 years.
Just mail it.
But I want to give it to him and see him have it. But now I'm serious. I'm afraid that if
That's
he's
when you
smart
mail
enough,
it to them, and then you say, when you get this package, FaceTime me, so I
I
can
love
watch
my
you open
father.
it.
When does he ever call me when I ask him to right away?
Well, he's calling us tonight.
That's fair.
Which, as you know, it is Father's Day, and we are going to be joined very shortly by two incredibly special guests. My father.
And my father.
Woohoo! For some context, when Monica and I finished Hemlock Grove and we were debating what show to watch next for the podcast, my dad is basically my best friend. He's also my business partner, which is a really weird concept.
But it's also really comforting because it's you can be comfortable and not have to worry about being professional all the time. We're well.
Right, I wouldn't want a business partner who wasn't my dad. I don't want to own my own business, but then my dad was like, by the way, I'm changing the business so that we both own it now. And I was like,
cool.
Great. Granted, the business is formatting this and other podcasts to come in the future. But, so yes, my dad is my business partner, so I often, when I'm stuck, run things by him, as you would in that situation.
Yeah.
And he was like, you know what would be really interesting, because we all know I like really old TV.
Yeah.
That's my thing. My dad often laughs that he's not even the one who told me to watch things like Columbo and Mission Impossible. I just did that shit for fun. And he was like, you know what you should watch? There was a show that Uncle David and I used to watch when we were kids that really scared the crap out of us as kids. And obviously, in terms of Monica's expertise with makeup and stuff, it would be cool to do something that's really old that doesn't have quite as much CG effects, and it's all practical. Everything that they have is practical, and that's Monica's area of expertise. So you guys should look at Kolchak. And he was like, I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, but I think it's out on DVD. And I said, yeah, Dad, it is. We already own it. He said, we do? I said, yeah. Because other things you might know about me is I'm OCD as shit, and nothing in my living room, DVDs, video games, books, all of those things are organized by anyone but me. Even when I was gone, my parents didn't add anything new to the shelf because I would have had a fit.
Yeah,
I didn't live here for 3 years and no one reorganized the shelf for 3 years because I would have had a fit.
And because I remember the first night that we actually recorded the episode together, the podcast together, and Cody was over, and you were showing him everything, and you guys were looking at the DVD shelf over there. You were like so analytical about.
Oh, I found something that was in the wrong place, and I literally immediately just stopped and was like, something's wrong on the shelf.
I remember when you were talking about the Power Rangers movies, you had to put another Power Rangers movie because it started with a T and not a P.
No, it's not that. It's that I like to organize alphabetically, but within a series, you don't organize alphabetically. Within a series, it needs to be in order. And Power Rangers Turbo, it's technically called Turbo, a Power Rangers movie. So it is a T, but also, so it was behind something that started with a P, but it comes first in the series, so I had to put it first.
Okay.
That's what it was.
Yes.
But so, obviously...
Your face, I am so sorry. I thought I had it on vibrate. When is my phone not on vibrate? That's my question.
So, we decided for Father's Day to do something fun. We were going to invite our fathers who watched the show when they were kids to join us in discussing the podcast. It'll be interesting because obviously Monica and I will have exactly like this week's worth of experience with this episode, whereas the episode came out in 1974, which means that my dad was 7
and my dad was
5.
5.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see their differences in opinions from when they were kids to now. And obviously they come at it from different areas of expertise. So.
And the one thing I will say, when it comes down to this show, where I feel like with Hemlock Grove, obviously there was more plot developments that needed to be talked about and more technicality things, and because it was the time that the show was made and how film and television had progressed since obviously what we're watching now, we were obviously very nitpicky with a lot of it. Whereas Kolchak, I feel like what we do is we overlook a lot of those. I don't want to say technical flaws because they really aren't, or like acting flaws. Because
I don't overlook them. I definitely bring them up all the time. I just don't
have such a strong issue with them.
I don't fault them so much because things are not dependent on them. Like when there are large plot holes in an anthology type series, they're bothersome, but they don't ruin the show. Yeah. Whereas when there are plot holes, like in Hemlock Grove, the whole Magdalena situation from beginning to end bothers me. In and out. I think the entire season 3 is tainted by the fact that they took the story that was already wrapped up and then said, just kidding, we didn't wrap that story up. We started
and it. Was simply, that whole storyline was simply put in there to make
have another female love interest because they killed off the first 2.
Yeah. And,
So like that is different. Like Kolchak has a different lady every week, but also like half the time he's in a different city every week. So like
and everything that he's like doing in this, like where we look at the acting capabilities, obviously of Darren McGavin, like he can take that shit away. Like
like your main actors, Darren McGavin and Simon Oakfield are solid actors every week. Their characters are very consistent. They don't do things that are outside of what Kolchak and Tony would be doing. Not all of the background actors are great. Not all of the technology is great, but the plot doesn't usually have massive holes. It has goofs. It has things that are weird
but those are more, in a way, kind of funny.
Right, but they don't have massive holes. So we're also not, like, microscoping it the way we were with Hemlock Grove.
Because I feel like Hemlock Grove, you almost had... I don't want to say it had this integrity, because not even a lot of people did talk about it. But with Hemlock Grove, you're like... With what you're dealing with in 1974 versus 2013, like, there's a lot more you could do.
I just tend to be much more forgiving of television that I know was filmed on videotape.
Yes, that is very fair. But like, even when it doesn't come down to that, if you can make a cohesive story,
Right. But
It's gonna
also,
matter.
I also think something that's interesting, and I'll talk about this when we have our dads, but I think it's interesting that we are on the 5th episode of this show, and we've only had 2 different directors and 4 different writers.
really,
Yeah. So, obviously, Hemlock Grove, within the first 7 episodes, there were 7 different directors.
Yeah.
And so I think having repeating directors, even when it's not a plot story, you have people that know how to work with the actors, know how to get what they want. And all of our guest stars are people who have 200, 300 credits
credits.
to their belt. Like,
Yeah.
they're not unknown people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think about it. Like, in Hemlock Grove, obviously, like, there are people who are now more famous,
Mm-hmm.
but, like, before Hemlock Grove, nobody, like, what had Joel De La Fuente done before Hemlock Grove, really? What has Landon Lieberman done other than, like, 2 movies, even after Hemlock Grove? Other than Famke Janssen, Bill Skarsgård, and Doug Ray Scott, who played Norman, we didn't have big actors. And granted, the actors, I don't think, I've already made my points on who I thought was a good actor and who wasn't clear, but I think that having less experienced actors in a more plot-driven show gives room for more problems. Whereas having very experienced guest character actors in a show that is just about one spots, you have these people who their job is to come in as a guest star on every show in the whole entire run of between the 50s and 80s. They know how to do one character and out, one character and out. And so I think it's just more cohesive in that sense.
and which that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Whereas where I think Hemlock Grove could have had the opportunity to take these not so well known actors and actresses, who I personally feel like the acting capability of almost every single person on that cast, I think had good capability.
Oh, yeah.
I feel the fact, and which I didn't really even know this about television, like, I didn't know there's, like, almost a new director that comes in to direct an episode almost every day.
Oh, for sure.
And in my sense, I feel like there should be a head director, and then having,
Well,
like,
I mean, that's what producers are for, or like the script editor, like the supervising producer. There's usually on television, at least in modern television, you have like your executive producers are the people who foot the bill. They're not necessarily there.
Yeah.
Eli Roth was the executive producer.
producer.
He paid for that show after
was
the
it.
first half of season 1. I don't think he was ever there. But then you have what's called a supervising producer or a showrunner. Sometimes you have both, depending on where the show is. They're called different things. In England, they're always called a showrunner. In America, they're often usually called the supervising producer. But what their job is to make sure that there is continuity among the characters, make sure that even when you have a different writer or director, you aren't messing with a character's integrity. And like, Shonda Rhimes created Grey's Anatomy. But Krista Vernoff, the current showrunner, has been a supervising producer since episode 1. She has never not been there. So she knows those characters as well as the actors, as well as Shonda. So she's never going to let an episode come out where Meredith does something that Meredith wouldn't do.
And that's where I think the issue when it came down to Hemlock Grove, a lot of characters were doing things that had motives that they wouldn't do.
And I think that was mostly a problem in season 3.
Yes. But I think when they found out that they weren't coming back, they said, balls to the wall, I don't give a fuck.
Right.
And that's really how that
And
whole season went.
I think I'm grateful that Kolchak doesn't have that problem.
Yeah, and I'm grateful that Kolchak is so loose-ended because we know that obviously it didn't continue on to where they thought it was going to continue.
Right.
So, like...
Well, but
I
I
don't
mean,
think I'll
and
be
there
upset
are
with the
there are
ending.
things like obviously we didn't really like that Monique disappeared and then came back, but like the trivia on IMDb said, there is no consistency in time between episodes. It's not like because
It's just a random story.
It's because it's an anthology series. It's not like you pick up knowing that you started yesterday.
Yeah.
So like last week's episode, The Vampire, takes place in the spring. They talk about it being spring. They talk about spring in Los Angeles. It premiered in October. It premiered a week after the episode before,
that
but was
was
in theory 6 months later.
Yes.
So the timeline is much more flexible.
Yes, because from the whole overflow of the show is simply hearing technically Kolchak's tapes. We're just watching the story unfold.
Right.
But it's like we're listening to him telling the story.
Exactly. Now, before we get too deep into this, let's welcome our guests, George and David. And I will try very hard to call them George and David so that you guys don't get confused when we just keep saying
Saying
dad.
dad.
All right, here we are joined by our fathers. Um, so why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves and give our fans some,
Info.
yeah.
About me information. So like the first day of class, we have to come back and say the one exciting thing you did over summer.
Sure. George, would you like to start or would you like me to start?
Well, how about maybe I'll start describing you first. You're a 52-year-old gal.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Anyhow, well, hello, ladies. Thank you for having us on your show. I've been watching it for the last 48 odd weeks, roughly, or so.
Yeah, this is episode 49. We're almost to a year.
And, I've seen it grow and change, and, we're continuing to, hope that we can improve it together with our, with our production company. We actually have a little production company here that does web and promotion work. And so we're hopefully going to expand our video offerings.
See, I told you guys, he's my business partner, but he's the one who knows what's going on, not me.
Again, the whole streaming world is continuing to grow and evolve, and there's so many platforms around, and so we're looking at how to grow our channels, grow our reach, different programs on topical areas. We know what we like to watch on in streaming services, and while we don't want to necessarily duplicate everything, I think there's some things we would look at as having a fresh perspective. From my perspective, or from my background, I really enjoy science fiction and pop culture, and I was really happy that our daughters and or nieces, as it were, went into this, because I think it takes some of their interests, different perspectives on their interests, kind of brings it together. And I think there's a lot of room to grow and to look at material. Monica has a very technical sense, in production and in, makeup and design are really her forte. And I really like her take on things. And, I've seen some of her own makeup and art, and it's tremendously impressive, to be honest. And
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I know she wants to pursue that farther, but I think getting a chance to talk about makeup and set design and art in those levels, looking at television or movies from various years, I think is a great opportunity. And again, obviously my daughter Mary Catherine, she's a theater and English major. And a bit of a sci-fi fan like her dad. I think I indoctrinated her into it earlier. So she's got a very academic perspective as well as a fandom view of things. So I'm really happy for that, and like to see this channel continue to grow, as well as any of the other projects we're working on.
I thought you were just going to talk about yourself. No,
I know.
Yeah, but the thing that I look at is the best things about me sometimes are what I did, and I helped you guys. And
okay, we're not supposed to be getting all emotional. I know this is the Father's Day episode.
Father's Day episode, but I didn't know I was going to cry.
You're going to make me cry now too. But, being a father is one of my most impressive things. So.
This is to be a whole sobbing circus.
My children, so. But from my own perspective, I have a day job. I run a construction company during the day, but science fiction, fantasy, movies, pop culture, those are all the things which my hobbies outside of that. And I'm in the process of developing a channel right now that addresses pop culture, science fiction in particular, but talks about it through the lens of meaning, and how governmental, how things we believe, whether it's political or philosophical ideas, are are represented in pop culture, for good or bad. And unfortunately, sometimes from my perspective, it's very bad lately. But we want to talk about that because I started out in my careers when I was much younger as a politician, very active in politics. I spent 5 years in Washington as a lobbyist when I was right out of college. And I look at that as my fundamental belief systems are well established. And I just look at modern trends and compare that to historical philosophy or history, actually, just how people in different eras responded. And I see a lot of waywardness in our current system. So those are some of the things about me. Like I said, I'm looking forward to, I haven't published anything on the channel. I'm really right now developing some sets and some, design elements for it, writing some of the narratives. And we'll be kicking off with probably a series of, 7 to 10 minute daily podcasts to talk about some issues and then eventually get into live streaming. So that's where we are, where I am personally with that. And this whole Kolchak, the whole Kolchak idea came from David and I talking to them. And, we remember this show from a long time ago. Again, I'll get more into tonight's episode a little bit later, but for me, tonight's episode was one of my least remembered. So it was watching it again was, I had to watch it again just to be refreshed with it. And it was as unmemorable after the last hour and a half as it was, 40 years ago. So.
For our consistent viewers who have watched this podcast the whole time, when I go off on those long tangents about religion and politics and why TV sucks, that's where I got it from. How that whole introduction to himself turned into a life lesson. That's where I got it.
And the one thing that I do want to say first of all, thank you, Uncle George, for all the lovely, amazing things that you had to say.
Well, you're lovely, wonderful children.
And I think that with me and Mary Kate starting this podcast and taking different aspects of the sides that we've taken when we talk about shows or movies or whatever it is, I think not only does our talent have to say about what we're capable of, but also the fact that we know what we're talking about and down to the nitty gritty, like the foundation work that goes into it. We don't go into it just like, I can do something really cool, but I know jack shit about it, where it's like, we feel like we have the knowledge to back our craft for it. And it's nice that it actually gets, acknowledged. So thank you.
And the whole goal is to get more people to see it, spread it. We're going to do some things to promote it. And like I said, I think this is a great opportunity.
What we will not be doing to promote it is answering any of those weird, spammy Instagram comments that we get every single day asking us to promote it on things that are not real. I'm so sorry, DJ Empire Records or whoever you are who asks us to promote every single week.
We should make an Instagram post about that. We should just put it promote. Just promote.
Anyhow, but so. Yeah, there's a lot of spam out there, but
We've also been contacted more than one time to join
ball shaving service.
Yeah, there's a company, Smooth My Balls. They make nutsack razors. They have contacted us and said that our page looks like a good fit for them more than once.
Well,
I'm not only a former client, I'm the president of the company.
Which takes us into David.
There you go.
Let me just say before we jump into David on that one, a number of the videos and the channels that I watch do get promotional subscriptions or promotional value out of Manscaped is the most prominent one. But that's, I always thought it was a little weird, but it's
I just don't feel that we're qualified for that particular type of razor.
Yeah. I was like, you could buy this for Father's Day. Get your father, husband, or boyfriend a nut shaver. There you go, America. Enjoy your life.
I don't have a boyfriend, and I would never buy that for my father. So
if it's anything like the Epawady, you can keep your nut shaver. Thank you.
Because that just pulls the hair, David, as we all know.
And that's exactly, so you can keep it. Anyway, all I got to say is ditto. I didn't know I had to write my manuscript to introduce myself. Geez, George, I got to follow that. Again, first of all, my name is David. I am Monica's father, by the way, just in case you didn't know that. Again, I echo the sentiments of George about our daughters. They are two wonderful young women. Both have grown up. It shocks me when I speak of my daughter, just knowing her being from a child and her being afraid of every and anything, for her to be this horror, supernatural, zealot as she is now. Okay. I know that word. I couldn't think of a better word.
No, I think it's a very accurate word.
Right.
Totally
And the problem being is that, like, when Monica was a child, I would sing Ethel Merman to her and she would get scared and cry. Okay. Or I would sing Where Are You Christmas and she would break down in tears. Okay?
Well, that's just because it's sad.
No, you were afraid of that song for a very long time.
Exactly. So, it's.
But I don't mean to interrupt you, David, but you singing Ethel Merman to anybody would make them run in horror and hide. But
I learned that from our mother, George. She sang Happy Birthday to me and I cried when I was a child. Because I had an ear for music and I realized this woman can't sing.
you were a professional musician, David, so I give you that.
But anyway, getting back to and just watching the two of you, what I love the most about your podcast and just you two in general, okay, is your ages are a little bit off, but you're close. But the fact that you being cousins and doing something and having that in common and just being close and sharing something to keep family ties close and to both of you just enjoy doing what you do and you can enjoy each other. And that's what I love to see, because the one thing I will say about our family, going into Father's Day, and just because these are days you spend with families in general, for the most part, our family was always a close-knit family. We did, when there were things, whether it was Memorial Day picnics, Labor Day picnics, 4th of July holidays, Christmases.
All the picnics.
Yes, Christmases were spent with my brother George at his house. I was the sweater guy, so every year I wore a sweater, and every year I was picking. You understand that, Mary Kate, because you enjoyed picking on my sweaters.
Oh, did I ever?
Yes, I believe you actually started the trend. Like I believe that.
Well, okay, the one time you wore like a female sheepskin sweater that was.
No, it was not a female.
I had the same one.
Well, then you should not raid my closet and go in your uncle's closet to get his sweaters. But listen, okay, then I'll blame my ex-wife for that. She bought it for me. Okay, so I'll plead that. But no, anyway, it's like I said, it's just enjoying the family time, enjoying the closeness, and watching my daughter and my niece have something in common and to share it with everybody else and to just show the world our family and show them how we interact and how we are. That I love. For me personally, I've been doing a podcast. It's From the Couch. It's a sports podcast. Doing it for 4 years with my brother Jeffrey, our other brother Jeffrey, who lives down in Florida. And the fact is, we started it out as a different name. It started out under The Morons and Me. It was supposed to be a back and forth banter, who would be the moron that week. The problem is that we realized that me and my brother knew a lot of the subject matter that we talked about. So it was hard to use the moron in me in that concept. So we tried to legitimize our concept a little bit by changing the name and making it more appropriate.
But don't worry, friends. He knows a lot about sports, but there's a lot that he doesn't know a lot about, and the morons may potentially be coming back.
Absolutely, because I am a moron. I'll tell you, I am. I make no bones about it. I know my role. Let's put it that way. And I stay in my lane. I don't try to get out of it.
And the one thing that I will say when Dad would talk about how I was like so afraid of everything, I know I have brought this up on the podcast before, and I will restate this again. This man,
This bald-headed beauty right here,
would play the Halloween. I remember I was reading Edgar and Ellen. He played the Halloween theme, so I would stay in my room and read my book. But instead of reading, I would cry on my pink bowl chair. I specifically remember that. Traumatized the hell out of me. Now it's my favorite movie.
Okay. Disclaimer, okay, between you and your brothers, okay, we had you crying up the stairs. We had my oldest son DJ run down the stairs saying that the bed was shaking and somebody was flipping the bed. And
okay, but there's the thing.
Okay.
There was some shit in that
no,
house.
DJ is a little bitch.
That too.
And
by the way, for those of you who don't know, DJ is my son.
Yes. He is Monica's brother. We've talked about her brothers before, but DJ is the one who is the same age as me, as I. And one time, no, he's the same age as I am. Yes, it's I. Okay. So you shook your head, and I was like, no, I was correct.
Well, as a teacher, you should know this and not even re-question yourself.
Confidence in your teaching skills, Mary Kate.
Listen, I've been speaking to non-native speakers for the last 3 years. Sometimes I'm a little dumb.
You said it.
So am me, but that's okay.
What?
I said so am me, but
Anyway, we were at Dollywood in Tennessee, which, for those of you who don't know, is a Dolly Parton themed amusement park.
Which I want to go.
It's amazing.
Pigeon Forge, Tennessee.
Yes, and there is one large roller coaster, only one. DJ cried for the entire ride line, and then was the only one who refused to get on it because there was supposed to be a thunderstorm later that day. It wasn't even raining yet, but he was sure the lightning was going to strike the roller coaster and kill us all. And even at 11, I said, if it was lightning, they would close the roller coaster and not let us on it. And he didn't believe me, so he missed the roller coaster.
What a boy.
He is a little bitch.
it's family. It's family. Everybody has family. And
Yeah,
everybody comes in all stripes and sorts and colors and
But
manners and
the last thing I want to say before we get into this, though, about Kolchak is, to me, I'm so glad you guys are doing this, and not because we had brought it up, but it's funny that when you guys started doing your podcast and started doing supernatural shows, I know you guys did Hemlock Grove and stuff like that, but the reason that we had brought it up to you is it just, from you guys doing this, it just got me thinking back to when I was a kid, when I was 7, 8 years old, and watching this show that completely scared it didn't scare me like but it was a suspenseful, when you're 7 years old and you're not, but I'll tell you what, today, when I watch it, I'm like, how? How did it do that?
See,
So-
I think that's a good place to start, because I think, like we had talked about 2 weeks ago on the Alien episode, that while I didn't particularly love the episode, I could rationalize how that would have been scary as a kid with the lack of sci-fi that existed at the time.
Right.
I don't know that this episode would be scary to anyone ever.
No. I had briefly, when me and Mary Kate got done watching the episode, we had exchanged some words, and I have a feeling that both of you know where I'm going to be going off on my tangent in this episode. But this was definitely one where I felt like had a consistent plot. I don't want to say plot hole, but there were holes and motives and reasonings for a lot of things.
The whole episode was a plot hole.
Yes, I feel like the episode as a whole was definitely lackluster, but where we were like, in a sense where it sucks that we're not going to be talking about the best episode of Kolchak with you guys. I like that we're going to be talking about probably our least favorite actually come across the board so far
because
with them.
I also have some questions about after watching this episode that I feel as though you guys will be able to potentially answer in a way that Monica cannot.
Yes.
So, with that in mind, today we are discussing Kolchak the Night Stalker, episode 5, The Werewolf, which is a generous title. It premiered on November 1st, 1974, and it was given a 7.8 star rating on IMDb, which is unfortunately somehow higher than the Alien episode.
Which is a lie. It's just a lie.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how. The blurb is Kolchak's in rough waters when he finds himself trapped on an ocean liner with a man who's been bitten by a werewolf, and the full moon is rising. I have questions about that as well. But it was directed by Alan Barron. This is the third of 4 episodes that he directed. He also directed the first episode, The Ripper, and the Alien episode. So we've talked about him already.
But you want to know what? It makes sense that he's directed these 3 episodes.
Because the shadow works the same in all of them.
Yes.
It was written by David Chase, who he did the teleplay for 6 episodes, 2 of which we've already seen, but this is the first of 2 that he's giving a writing credit, not just a teleplay credit. But it was co-written with Paul Plyden. This is the only Kolchak episode he writes, but he did write 14 episodes of Mission Impossible, the TV series, so I was expecting a little more. I was let down. I should not have expectations, I have learned.
Especially with what we've been doing besides Kolchak.
Our guest stars this episode, we had Dick Gautier. I would pronounce it that way. I don't know if he pronounces it in the French way.
That is his name. And actually, Dick Gautier was, again, all the actors in the show are typically well-versed character players. Dick Gautier is he's more of a comedic guy, so his roles tend to be more comedic.
Which his role in this was also the comedic. But I think the thing that I saw the most episodes for him, he played Jaime in Get Smart, the original TV show.
Yes.
But also he was primarily a voice actor, actually. He did a lot of voice work. He was in the old Transformers show, What's New Scooby-Doo, G.I. Joe.
Ooh.
Like he did tons and tons of voice work.
Now,
Right,
before we run the rest of the guest stars, because this was part of like the technical team aspect, and I normally will not talk about this department, but because there's no one to fall back on when it comes to the makeup, because there will be a discussion had about that, we had Raymond Beal as the art director, which normally on a set, when it comes to makeup and stuff, and you don't have a department, you go to the art director to take care of that stuff. And when the art director drops the ball, there's going to be things that need to be said.
Now, Dad, would you like to enlighten Monica on what else Raymond Beal was the art director on so she can be even more pissed off at his work? You told me already.
Raymond Beal was the art director on did I? Oh,
Yes,
he was
you
on
did.
the Munsters. So how did he do the Munsters and do
That
this so bad?
face, that face. Yes, how he did Eddie Munster's face and yet somehow also made this werewolf. Baffled.
And again, I don't know what his full role in the Munsters was, but he should have been better.
Like, especially having a track record like that, you would.
Right, like he might not even have led the art department. He only worked on a few episodes, but he's at least seen it done correctly.
Yeah.
And to my brother's, to David's information, he'll appreciate this. Beal was also the art director on 2 of the live action Saturday morning TV series back in the mid and late 70s. Space Academy, which featured, which was on, I believe, CBS, and it featured Jonathan Harris of Dr. Smith fame from Lost in Space as the teacher or professor at this Space Academy. And then its spinoff, Jason of Star Command, and Scotty from Star Trek, James Doohan played the commander of the base in Star Command. And they were on, like I said, Saturday morning live action shows. And Their budgets were about $3.75. So yeah, it was well performed and well staged.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Just like, here's the thing. Like, I understand that I cannot hold this man up to such a high degree from what a made-to-TV movie was, and now a series. But for what the series was, it seemed to have at least a good, decent amount of pull. Why couldn't you pull your head out of your ass to do this? He's done other. I don't know if he was the art director in other episodes. I would have to go back and check. But
so
can I just make one point? And we are talking about this episode, and we are talking about what we saw on the screen. But let's remember something. This is 1975. The budgets that television networks had to actually run these shows pales in comparison today. Like when you look at for example, Friends. Okay, the television show Friends that ran from 19 whatever to 2000. 1984 to 2004. By the end, or 1994. Sorry, I'm thinking Frasier, the character, he ran from 81. But anyway, so by the end of Friends, each one of those actors is making $1 million an episode. I mean, in the whole season of Kolchak, they probably spent about $5,000 in special effects. So I mean, just that. So let's just put it in perspective.
I agree with that, but I think that to Monica's point about the effects, though, the reason why I remember Kolchak was not because of the effects, though. It was because of the way they built suspense with directorial action, so cutting, the way they moved around camera-wise, the shadowing and the lighting.
Well, and that's what we were saying. So far, the 3 episodes that have been directed by Alan Barron, the Ripper, the Alien one, that is just too long of a title for me to continue to repeat, and this one have all done massive amounts of shadow, like just watching the shadow. And that can be really scary. The problem is, I mean, and the Alien one, I think the thing that made it successful was the fact that we had all this work in the shadow and then we still never saw anything. So it was, your imagination was the only thing you had to work with. Same with the Ripper. We did see him, but he was just a guy.
Yeah.
In this one, it's a werewolf. So there's a higher expectation.
And the only reason why I am so nitpicky about this werewolf, it was because it looked like they were trying too hard. Whereas if they would have subtracted some of that hair that they used on him, this comment I had made earlier, I am not going to put into the podcast, but that's what I thought of.
And I don't even know what it was, but I'm sure I know what it was.
You do. When we watched The Alchemist,
it was the 70s, by the way.
It was Jesus Christ. Anyway, when we were watching The Alchemist, the makeup they did in that was really solid. Like, you would see that level of degree of makeup in some shows we have now. And granted, it could have been a different art department, art director, anything like that. Like, that could have been what changed.
I will actually read you the note I took the first time I saw The Mask. And I wrote, "Stop. Why is that a first draft of Chewbacca?"
Well, and that's the thing is, the thing is they could have heightened the show if they would have only shown the claws. They could have spent more money on making the hands and more visual, because if you look at the shadowing, there was quite a bit of stalking that happened in the episode where the beast was only shown in a shadow while Kolchak was being hunted. That was suspenseful. That was a suspenseful way to do it. When he appeared in front of the guy, it was like, you're too funny. It's like you want to laugh at the guy, not be afraid of him, right? Because it's just, again, it was a less sophisticated time. This was before a lot of the classic horror that we've evolved into. I mean, Friday the 13th came out, or not Friday the 13th, excuse me. Halloween came out 4 years later.
Yeah.
Well, and that's when I said that it looked like the first draft of Chewbacca. I then looked up to make sure, and Star Wars didn't even come out for
Right.
another 3 years
Years.
after that
Right.
as well.
And like, and there's nothing wrong. And every time when we've talked about execution of, you know, work when it comes to makeup and stuff like that, I've always said it was a different time. But even in this time, I don't think you can. And knowing that you're shooting on darker film, he could have used contacts in there. Like put Michael Jackson his ass and pull the Thriller, pop some yellow contacts in there, and just, if you want to get zoomed in shots, zoom in on the eyes where you only have to focus on this area. Make close up images on certain spots, make that be the scary part, and use more of that shadow work. And the freeze frame. I hated the freeze frames in the fight scenes. Could not stand them. Could not.
Well, again, I think some of the stuff too is if you watch the cut camera. I mean, if you watch the way they were trying to do it, they weren't really giving you too much time on his face. They were all just cut shots, because I think they realized that if you take some glue and stick it on somebody's face and just sweep up like somebody
barbershop
was in a barber shop and they just stuck hair on his face and said, "You're a werewolf. Go be a werewolf."
I know, but
Well,
go ahead.
And I will say, to their credit, a little tiny bit, I was in a movie a few years ago where the main character was a werewolf, and this poor kid, Jaden Lebron, for those of you who watched the It movies, he is playing werewolf, and he had basically like a beard extension, kind of like prosthetic hair wig on his face the whole day, like for all of the days of the shoots, all day long. And then also on top of that, he had to wear a ski mask over it for some of the shots. So the poor kid was sweating to death. I felt so bad for him. He looked so hot and uncomfortable all day long. Then you think about how sweaty Kolchak is. With that much glued to your face, they probably couldn't keep him on set for that long.
Right.
And there are little things that when you go back and you look at that you can tweak, you could like fix. And if things were just shot, like if they wanted to keep him as hairy as they did, and they just solely gave it shadow work and zoomed in on a part of his face or his hands, and it wasn't going well, I would have much rather taken that than those sporadic, weird, swishy, freeze frame, odd shots in the fight instead of just showing me from behind and like zoom ins. It missed the mark for me on that one.
Well, and I will say in terms of the fights, they used a lot of like car crash dummies this episode.
You mean picking up and throwing a woman into a swimming pool?
That was, I mean, the stunts on this show are obviously
I will say he was a good stunt man. He was doing good.
Oh no, the jumping and everything was beautiful. But we've seen our various police officers who tuck and roll in odd ways. But this one, it was so obvious that they were not human bodies.
Oh yeah, it was like picking up like a fake body pillow and tossing it. Like that shit wobbled in the wind. Like there was no mass there.
You know, going into the stunts and going into the fight scenes and going into all that stuff. It's kind of funny because to me, I had the hardest time getting used to, as films evolved and things evolved, I had the hardest time getting into the CGI and like the Matrix stuff where they would stop action, guys would bend over and do the, you know, to me, growing up, watching movies, even the original Star Wars, before they took it back and re-edited it and added this and added all those different things to it, the special effects and the things that they had to do and the way they had to go about making those things happen, as cheesy as it was and as not as mainstream as it is today, back then, to me, it was at least somewhat realistic. I mean, without being as real as you can, because now you can make anybody do anything, morph in any way, do any position, do this, do that. And just by the changing of a camera or the digitalization of a person. Whereas before, they didn't have any of that. So everything that they did was choreographed, acted out, as bad as it looked. And trust me, in this episode, like when the werewolf goes to like rip somebody and the guy like falls down before the werewolf even raises his hand to do anything. It's like, okay, but that it is.
I'm all for choreographed fights and actually like, especially because I have training in stage combat. So like I'm all for doing choreographed fights, but it's the believability. Like there have been some really decent fight scenes elsewhere in Kolchak. But I mean, the very first TV movie with the vampire, when you watched the guy pull the shelf down on top of him, that was a little bothersome.
Yeah.
And the fact that this was like
A whole
actually
episode of it?
like actually just throwing dummies across the room and not even trying to
Just
pretend they were people. I don't mind the cops tucking and rolling and like falling because that's what they have to do. You don't have the time, the budget, the money to like
By stunt actors for background characters.
right. And honestly, half the time nowadays in Hollywood, people have stunts for shit that they shouldn't need a stunt actor for. Like it's okay to fall. Your face is not worth that much money, hun.
Exactly.
Anyway, but so I'm all for as real fake fighting as you possibly can. I mean, and it's not like it's impossible. We all are WWE fans. Like you can do it.
Yeah.
It just
And
it was just bad this time.
And the one thing that I wanna bounce back off real quick of what Dad was saying about the things that he loves about old movies. That's why anytime anyone has ever asked me my favorite special effects moments, and like my favorite movie is Halloween because the budget was so small and they took a William Shatner mask and made one of the most iconic pieces of imagery
Oh yeah.
in horror. And I will always commend it. If you can do practical first, go practical.
Yeah.
Like I will never shove to do like CGI. Like the one school I was going to, they had a separate CGI section for you to special effects CGI. And because of the fact that we are turning into a digital age, I'm like, it makes it almost unemotional attachment to what you're doing, because my biggest thing was knowing that one day I could put another Michael Myers on the screen and have another iconic horror figure that would just go down in history. But knowing that you did that by hand
Yeah.
is something way more intensely emotional and personal
Oh,
to you
for sure.
than drawing it on a computer. Like I'm not knocking it, but you would never, I think, be able to experience that.
Yeah.
Just,
And-
pressing
not
some
to-
buttons, putting some numbers in and going for it.
And not to jump off to a different program per se, but I'll be honest, one of the most enduring qualities of one of the most famous science fiction shows of all time, Doctor Who, was that the budget was micro tiny, as it were, and they did a lot
I
of
honestly
practical
think
effects.
that guy in the bar in this episode of Kolchak spent more on a Mai Tai than they did on the entire first season of Doctor Who.
Yeah, the $3, it was $3 or something.
No, it was $1.80. He said, I spent $1.80 on this Mai Tai. I said, first of all, I want to go to that bar.
$1.80.
Second of all, $1.80 might have been the entire first season budget of Doctor Who.
Well, remember though, in 1974, $1.80 was the minimum wage. So just to keep that in perspective.
And you can get a Mai Tai if you go to the Elks Lodge for $1.80.
But the one thing I was just going to say about the effects and the you can cheesy effects and like low budget things can be enduring. It's not or endearing. It's not it's not that issue. It's just there are some things that you have to work around, and that, I mean, in the effects in Kolchak were good for the television budgets and the time it was shown.
Yeah.
You know, in Doctor Who, for instance, they actually had a group that was called Havoc, and Havoc was the stunt people. They did all of the stunts. So in most of the Doctor Who series from the early 70s, Havoc is involved, and they play the unit army characters, because those were all the people that got thrown around and did a lot of fighting. So whether they died or lived, they were always in the next episode because they were the team that did all the stunts. So, you know, as background guys. And that was their specialty. That's pretty much all they did. They probably only had like, the leader of them probably had 10 lines of dialogue over 7 years, but he was in every episode, you know.
And like, speaking of armies and stuff like that, me and Mary Kate have stated multiple times on this podcast, when anyone holds a gun in the show, they make stormtroopers look like fucking legends. Like, I don't understand how Kolchak is the only dude with any aim on this show. He's a reporter, not even a cop. And you make me believe these men have been trained
Well,
to use a gun.
I have a note. Once again, we're surrounded by officers who have never fired a gun before in their lives.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, watching the episode, and this is one of those things that as watching something like that and seeing how they do the stunts and how they do did you notice when he was climbing up the stack and the police officers were shooting at the werewolf? Okay. Did you notice the pre-made holes that were next to the werewolf walking up? So as he walked, they would blow out like so you could actually see the
You could see where the officers shot, but it was actually popping out of the barrel instead of a bullet going in.
So and when he got to this certain area, they're like, oh, we missed. I mean, a perfect line straight up the ladder on the sides. I mean, they were terrible at shooting the werewolf, but they got the exact line up the entire smokestack.
Just twist. Please just twist. 3 inches to the right and you kill the guy, right?
But also on the gun issue, Kolchak's ability to get rid of used shells might have been the strangest thing I've ever seen.
It took him way too much time to reload that shotgun.
At first I was like, oh, he's doing it slow and methodically because he's trying not to drop the shells. And then he just goes,
He throws it.
Well, and that's the thing that I was like, if I'm the werewolf in the shadow and I realize that this guy don't know how to use a gun. five minutes to put 2 bullets in a shotgun. Anytime between now and then I should go out and get him instead of just keep sneaking up on him.
And with that whole stalking thing, it almost made it look like when I thought Kolchak, I'm like, oh, he's saving the shell. He's going to throw it to divert the werewolf, and then he's going to go the other way. He throws a shell, walks exactly where he threw the shell, and the werewolf looks back, and then he's like,
and also in this scenario where the werewolf is apparently not fully understanding how to do anything, this werewolf is strong enough to rip iron fetters apart, but not to not get thrown over the side of the balcony by Kolchak, who's hanging with one hand.
Well, yeah,
I get it.
But remember, at least the good thing about the gun stuff here with the shotgun was that was the only thing that Kolchak did that was really right, because if silver bullets were the key, okay, he was not going to make a silver revolver shell.
Right.
Making a shotgun shell or adding a silver projectile to a shotgun shell was actually the smartest thing he did.
Because it gives him more chance to hit the correct spot when you have a buckshot.
Well, no, but you can't he didn't have the equipment to actually put gunpowder into a bullet casing, whereas a shotgun shell has the powder there. And he could just put the projectile.
Where did he get the gun though?
That I don't know. It was probably because it was probably the evil Gopher Grandy that got it for him, because that was my thing. They showed him procuring the priest.
Mm-hmm. They showed him sneaking into the room to get the buttons to melt down the bullets. They explained everything. They show him melting it down and making it, although I don't really know where he got the equipment to melt it
Yeah, I was wondering where he got the pot and the torch, and and then did you see when he left his room and he made sure that he left the torch on? That's like fire hazard.
Well, it was the 70s. Fire hazards were dude, you light a match in a room if someone's smoking a cigarette.
But more importantly than that, here's my thing. First of all, he has the priest come in and do a Latin marriage prayer or whatever it was.
No, it was one about death. He switched it to the one about death.
Okay, because this guy apparently quit priest school after he learned how to marry people and do funerals, and that's it.
Right. So, and he knew it in Latin though, which was good. He just happened to have a Latin.
It was the 70s. They knew more Latin back then.
No, that's true. So, but what I want to know is here. So, he finally gets right up close and personal and is able to shoot the werewolf. Now, silver bullet goes into the werewolf, yet the werewolf
Kept
has
going.
nothing happened to him until Kolchak throws him over the boat. Other than that, there was no like recoil, like if
No,
you
they did show him gripping his chest and slowing down, but it was a very delayed reaction.
Yeah.
If we all can go back to even further into the Lon Chaney, Bela Lugosi era of what the werewolf is and what happens, is usually when the werewolf would be shot with a silver bullet or anything like that, he would transform back into his
He'd
original
crumple to the
state.
ground and then transform back into his non-wolf self.
So you never even saw the werewolf become mortal again. And so from
Well,
that,
it was a son of a bitch to get the hair on in the first place, was going to be a son of a bitch to take it off.
but again, and I get that, but again, I just think there were some things in the show that could have been done just to kind of go back to the actual werewolf legend and try to keep things a little more.
Well, I also have a question about werewolf legend in general, and this came up while we were working on Hemlock Grove, but where did the concept of silver bullets even come from? Because ancient myths about werewolves said that they died because of Glucksilver, which is actually mercury, not silver.
Which was one thing that was very accurate.
In Hemlock Grove, they used mercury to kill werewolves, not silver.
And because me and Mary Kate, the reason why we also feel justified picking apart this werewolf is because Hemlock Grove is a shit show in every goddamn aspect. Those wolf transformations were, even though like obviously they had to be done CGI, but part practical, like they definitely did a decent mix where I was content with a lot of that stuff. It was the most gory, realistic thing that you would expect a wolf transforming into.
The first time it happened, I vomited.
Well, yeah, because you saw eyes fall out of a person's skull.
I don't do eyeball
snout
stuff.
come out of the mouth. That was the coolest shit I've ever seen, and I will
So
stand
George,
by that.
do you know where the silver bullet theory comes from, or were they talking about, like, people say silver bullet, were they talking about quicksilver, which again is mercury, which is another name for mercury, quicksilver, and they just have just shortened it up for the silver bullet theory, and
Maybe that's why none of the wolves died.
Well, I think the quicksilver, the Glucksilver is where it comes from, but I wonder when the transition
went from mercury to actual silver.
And like also where did it get lost in translation? Because obviously like things evolve over time, but I think most people nowadays would never know the mercury thing.
I would tell you from a movie standpoint or from a storytelling standpoint, I think it's more plausible that people would tend to have silver around as opposed to mercury. So maybe
you don't just carry mercury around in your pocket.
Mercury is in thermometers.
Everybody break your thermometers. Here comes the werewolf. But again, the thing is, I think from a storytelling standpoint, from a believability standpoint, I think the ease of talking about silver aspect. Oh well, people can get their hands on silver quicker. You have silver in your silverware. You have there's more access to it. So instead of trying to make the believability of somebody just happening to have a drawer full of mercury. Well, I have silverware. I can melt down my silverware, make silver bullets.
Well, and that's true. And I think that probably part of it has to do with the whole
Quicksilver.
No, but the whole religious aspect in these myths and how churches would have silver in them
Sure.
more easily
than anything else really. And so like it is probably just lost in translation to those simple like small things. It's just crazy to think about how where Hemlock Grove did have a lot of faults.
That's the thing. Hemlock Grove did a really, really bad job of storytelling, but the research that they did into the traditional myths that they were using was very thorough.
Yeah.
Whereas this show,
Oh.
I think the actual storytelling itself, the dialogue, the flow of an episode, I like better, but it's very much playing on the what would the average viewer in 1974 know about a werewolf?
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
And
So
going off of
so I just did a quick little research, um, and historically, like you said, Mary Kate, the silver weakness for a werewolf um, isn't prevalent. I mean, but it does exist. So the connection it's out of a German legend, German folklore, um, where the association of silver and the moon can't come together. The silvery moon, and
That makes sense.
so that comes together a little bit. And there's a claim that the beast of uh, Gevadon was shot by a silver bullet. And there's a folklore in Germany that says a clever lad suggested, and this is obviously translated to the English. A clever lad suggested that they gather all their silver buttons, goblets, belt buckles, and so forth, and melt them down into bullets for their muskets and pistols. Then they slaughtered the creatures and rid the area of the lycanthropes. So there's a little bit for it, but again, it made you can't really make easily mercury bullets.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mercury doesn't solidify as well.
You can also
Right,
make
so you'd have to make a
cool water.
capsule, and a bullet capsule is a little bit harder because, again, a lot of these things come out
Yeah,
of the
like
tree.
in Hemlock Grove, obviously it was a much more modern show, but they literally were trying to inject the kid with mercury.
Right.
So like that would work, but if you're trying to fight off a werewolf with like weapons,
No.
Mercury's not exactly
Weapon.
You could break off a rectal thermometer. I mean,
But like, oh my god.
but all the mercury would drip out before it got there.
And also, what if you used it like a holy water? Because of a vampire's weakness is holy water, and like when you think of vampires and werewolves.
So you just want to like walk around
Splash
with
it.
like holy water full of mercury just in case something
Yes.
supernatural comes near
Just
you.
I got that motherfucking thing on me, splash splash.
That would require believing in Jesus.
The thing is that there isn't a lot of discussion that I've seen about the blessed idea.
Yeah, that was interesting. The fact that it had to be blessed, but it had to only be blessed in Latin.
Well, yeah, because if you look at, I mean, and again, if you think about the way the show depicts certain tropes, doesn't make sense to me because, for instance, you can't stop a vampire by crossing two candlesticks together. Okay.
Well,
They
did take that from a 1930s horror movie, though.
yeah.
I understand that, but the real myth is that it's because it's a blessed religious
Right.
artifact.
That's why when he started drawing the lipstick on the door, I was like, what is that gonna do?
It's like so no vampire could ever see the letter T in print or something. It's like I mean, think about it. Oh my God, it's the T. I can't read that anymore. But no, it's they're very loose and fast with their interpretations of
also
of
all of Kolchak's like research plans are very, very involved. Like the number of steps that he has to do to get to the solution, like with the zombie when he had to like make sure it was asleep and this and that and it had to be a certain kind of salt and a certain kind of thread. And I was like, that is way too many steps. That zombie's gonna kill you.
Like it.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say the one thing I gotta give Kolchak credit for is that no matter how much random shit, and he's starting at ground zero to build up to get to it being believable, even though most of the time he sees it, but to figure out how to stop these creatures, he sure as hell makes sure he knows every goddamn way to do it.
Well, can I just say something? He's a reporter, and again, a good reporter digs to find facts and stuff like that. So he knows, like, if he's confronted with something, as a probably an educated man, he probably has to study many things. Why he would have to study medieval werewolves or vampires in 74 San Francisco, I don't know. But hey,
Well,
it's
but
San
here's
Francisco,
here's
so-
here's my only problem with that thought. I think that makes sense. He is an educated man, and probably as the series goes on, and he sees more weird shit, he's
He'll
probably
just
just
know
gonna
more.
believe it. But like they actually show him doing the research about the vampire. They show him doing the research about the aliens. They show him doing the research about the zombies. He is stuck on a cruise ship, and the captain has blocked all outgoing phone calls, and yet he suddenly knows all of the steps you need to kill a werewolf.
Yep.
Well, again, now let's just
God.
let's just call it what it is, okay?
Movie magic.
There are some things like let's just say there are some things that you can learn just based on things being passed down. There's things you can remember from your childhood. Okay, so to sit there and say that Kolchak took place and werewolves were never talked about or didn't exist until this one happened to be on a cruise ship, that didn't happen. So the fact that he had to draw on his memory to try to remember how to kill a werewolf, and the fact that he had to go and, okay, well, we need to make this silver because we need silver bullets. And now we have to go and, well, I remember hearing about this prayer, but it has to be done in Latin. And so he's drawing on his memory from things that he's heard about from different sources. And so he's trying to put a plan together that isn't a written down cohesive A, B, C, D.
That's fair.
I have a theory. Ready? Knock it out of the water. So here's my theory. You know, based off, we go off of what Dad said, is that's how he figured it out. If he figured out how to stop a werewolf because of the fact that he watched like old werewolf movies and go like, that has to work. Just like when they gave that nod to that 1930s horror movie, if it's in real time in this universe and he's using it because he saw that horror movie, boom. If he's doing this stuff because of what he's seen in horror movies in the past, dealing with these subject matters, that could also explain why the silver didn't change him. That could have been a myth, and it could have been Mercury. Like as if you're trying to think that it's cool, but they're not really that smart. That's just me trying to like give extra zhuzh to something.
And remember, I mean, he's a reporter. Okay, he probably took classes that required him to read literature.
Yeah.
And literature, maybe. I mean,
Reading books? Who does that?
Journalism majors maybe do that every once in a while. I mean, maybe. And so
Not in
again, they
2021,
live in
they
a
don't.
world where he lives in a world where these fantastical creatures are legends or folklore. So it's not, even if he didn't see a movie per se,
Yeah.
there's certainly the literature of the time, because he knew what to call it a vampire. I mean, so even the terminologies that they use are based on this fantastical lore being real, even though most people believe it's just fiction, right? And so that's the hook of the whole show, is that all of these fantastical creatures from the past, okay, what are they, or monsters or what have you, are rooted in, truth, are rooted in like some kind of fact. So a zombie is a voodoo thing, right? In the story, you're going to come to the Spanish moss mystery or murders, which is going to talk about the Bayou swamp monster, Père Malfait, who's a legendary, character that's, down the road. And so, so all these legendary monsters and things, whether they're aliens or werewolves or, I mean, heck, Jack the Ripper, if you will, was a thing. So they use the context that these historical creatures, this historical literature, the myths of our past are real. And that's where, and then aliens are real. And that, again, that's where the show springs into the future, because what happens is that people that watch that who are our age, if they were in creative places, that formed the inspiration for a lot of future type of shows. And obviously the most notable one is X-Files, and I know that I don't know how much you've talked about that yet, but basically X-Files is the natural successor to Kolchak. In fact, Chris, I think it's Chris Carter who I think did the X-Files.
He credited Kolchak as being what he watched as a kid that made him want to.
And he even tried very hard for Darren McGavin to play Kolchak in his show.
Oh, that would have been
and
so
he did.
cool.
Kolchak, Darren McGavin did appear in the X-Files, but he would not play Kolchak. He played another character.
Yeah.
But that was the whole thing, where there's that continuity of using, of making the things that are legendary or folklore real, and that's some of the good stuff about the show.
Right.
It's a different way. It's not the big Hollywood, monster universe of the 40s, with the Mummy and the werewolf and Frankenstein and Dracula.
Yeah,
and
the Universal monster.
Universal monsters. But it takes that root and just carries it into a modern setting. And it was one of the first to really do that.
Now, when you were talking about Jack the Ripper, going back to that, because when me and Mary Kate, not only has this director done the really cool shadow work, he's made 2 of the episodes that made us go, but why? At the end of the episodes.
Yeah.
I don't, so, okay. Questions. This man worked at a NATO facility where there was a freak werewolf attack and everybody died except for there was one survivor who disappeared. Okay, fine. That we know how he became a werewolf. Great. Then he goes to Montana and kills a random family. No idea why or who they are to him or what made him go from Greenland to rural Montana, but here we are.
And then go from rural Montana to Los Angeles to get the idea to go on a confined cruise boat.
Right, like I'm sitting here thinking, I'm a werewolf. I'm having these terrible attacks. I cannot control myself. I hate that I'm a werewolf. I want someone to drug me or tie me up or get me down so I don't kill anybody. So let's go on a boat.
Now here is my thing. Maybe he was thinking that if he could kill everyone on the boat and then just let the boat just like die at sea, or what exactly happened to happen.
Well, again, now you got to remember, now if he's really, and again, being the werewolf and then being the human part of the werewolf, maybe he does have remorse and he is trying to break out of it. There's certain things about the story that just don't make sense. For example, okay, like what we've always been taught about a werewolf is the werewolf has to actually be out into the moonlight and see the moon. Whereas he was in his cabin and there was no light, no window, no nothing, and he was laying in a bed and turned into the werewolf and all of a sudden got superpowers and ripped himself out of the... So, there, go ahead, Joe.
No, but to your point, did we ever see the moon?
No.
No.
And that's why I raised my hand. Also, they talk about how the NATO thing happened and then exactly 1 month later the Montana thing happened and now it's exactly 1 month later and he's on the boat. But this takes place over 2 nights.
Yep. So one of those nights would not be a full moon.
So what you're telling me is...
Could have been a new moon.
A new moon would not happen directly after a full moon, David. That's not how the moon works.
You want to know what? You gotta give me credit. I might be dumb, but Dad takes the cake sometimes. I got it from the best.
Well, actually, he could have crossed the equator and he could have had the moon on this side and then the moon on that side. Maybe it's like different time zones.
I remember they were saying they were going to sail.
They did say they were trying to run away from the moon. I was like, that's not how science works either, but okay.
I was like, hey, get us on court to go back. We got to see if we can, travel out of this moon.
Yeah, there are continuity problems to the story, obviously. I mean, you try to be as true to it and you try to tell a story, but even some of the best movies have the most ridiculous plot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
I will say we kind of got off track, which is fine because we were talking about the episode, but we never finished talking about the guest stars. And I will say, Dick Gautier, my note about his character, Mel, is that it was literally David.
Yes.
Why? I just wanted to hang out at the bar, man. Let's go. We're going.
Yeah.
Come
No,
on.
but my favorite was the fact that he and that Wendy chick got married and then got divorced and then dated on single cruises because they liked each other better when they were divorced. And I was like, wow, sounds like people I know.
I've never dated anybody I'm divorced. What are you, nuts?
Our other guest stars were Henry Jones, who played the captain. He had 206 credits on his IMDb, including Vertigo, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 3:10 to Yuma, and my personal favorite, he was a main character on Mrs. Columbo, the really shitty spin-off that wasn't actually a spin-off of Columbo.
But he actually in the 70s he made at least 3 great appearances. He played the villain, and he was good at playing villains, by the way. He played the villain in 3 of my favorite shows. One was actually one was in the mid 60s, one was in the late 60s, and then one was in the 70s. He played and David, you may remember the last of these. He played Dr. Smith from Lost in Space. He played his cousin,
Okay.
a villain in Lost in Space. He also played a villain in an episode of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, another Irwin Allen classic sci-fi.
We have that on DVD too.
Yes. And then in the 70s, he played this character 3 or 5, I mean, between 3 and 6 times, and I can't remember exactly what the IMDb said about him, but he played a villain, a recurring villain on The $6 Million Man. He was the one that made lifelike robots who fought the $6 Million Man.
Yep.
And so he appeared many times that way, and he was very good at being kind of that creepy villain, because he
I
was
can see
just
that.
had that. Yeah,
It's the
'cause he's kind of-
mustache.
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah, and even when he didn't always have a mustache for those roles, but when he did, he just, the way he says things, and he's got that look. If he gets that kind of mischievous villain look to him, that's like he's not like scary, but
it was his voice.
the voice too. Yeah,
It's just that kind of, well, this is how, just that slow,
Yeah.
methodical, like.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Of course he was. Of course, he should have been like a 4-star admiral in some navy as opposed to the captain of a ship, because I don't know what kind of epaulets he had on, but they were like not the captain of anything. They were like an
Also-
admiral of something.
Yeah, also, he knew way too much about the Maritime Code. He knew that entire thing by heart. And I'm not really sure what the uniforms that the guys were wearing, their dress uniforms, but my favorite moment of the dress uniforms was when all of the captains and everything were running down the stairs, and they just looked like penguins waddling down the stairs.
Well, that's because the two main guys that were actual officers who had dialogue, one had captain stripes and one had commander stripes, and neither of them were those roles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a little costuming problem.
That costuming goes to William Job.
Yep. William Joe wrote the name down just in case we needed to yell at him, because I know we probably were going to.
Our Kolchak lady friend of this episode, her name
He
was
has one
Paula.
in every episode, it
She
seems.
has one in every episode. Paula, she was played by Nita Talbot, who she has 152 credits. She was one of those in a little bit of everything. She was in an episode of Columbo, obviously. But she also was nominated for an Emmy for a supporting actress role for a villain that she played on Hogan's Heroes for a season.
Didn't she win the Emmy?
No, unfortunately, she
Okay,
did not
so
win it.
all right.
But the one thing about her character, Paula, right?
Yeah.
Her first 2 seconds in this episode, if you did not sit there and look at that woman and go, yeah, that's either my niece or my daughter, you both are lying to yourselves.
She was Monica. But also, my problem is she was my favorite of the Kolchak ladies so far, in terms of her spunk and willingness to go along with everything Kolchak said, but also give him sass.
Mhm.
Like when she said, "Don't try to con me, just lay it on me."
Yep.
Loved it. She did not get enough screen time for how sassy she
didn't.
was.
She was
Right.
really good. And my favorite one was from last week with I loved her.
I did not. I
But
thought she was the real estate agent. So dumb.
I loved her, but I
So
honestly like this one too. Like, they're both really great.
And then our last guest star of the episode is obviously the werewolf himself, played by Eric Braeden. Eric Braeden is one of those guys who, if you're my age, you probably couldn't place him if you said that name, but if you saw a picture of him, you go, Oh yeah, him, because he was on The Young and the Restless for like 112 years.
Mr. Newman.
Victor Newman.
With Victor Newman.
Is he
the
still
Yeah.
on Young and the Restless?
I don't know, actually. I think he might still be on Young and the Restless.
Probably is. That guy
Probably.
has been a daytime soap opera actor for as
Yeah.
long as he's been an
I
actor.
think he's been nominated overall for 19 awards, 9 of which were daytime Emmys, and he's won 6 awards, 1 daytime Emmy and 5 a soap opera of the year
Digest
award.
Award, right?
Yeah, soap opera digest awards. So
Now I don't.
Soapy.
Snoopy is what it
Now
is. Yeah.
I don't know if you looked at. I don't know if you want to do trivia with them and discuss the funny goofs.
Well,
You know,
let me just say about Eric Braeden. You know,
Yes.
the thing about the sad part is he was cast in this role, and I mean he was given what he was given to work with. But you know, me being my age, with my mother, I did used to watch when I was home. She'd be watching soap operas, so I used to watch soap operas. Okay, and so I did like.
it's okay. You can admit
No, I
that you
do
watch
like-
soap operas for fun.
I don't watch them, but no, I do like Eric Braeden. I think he's a very good character actor. And-
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think he did a lot with the role he got.
Oh, I loved all of the moments that he had. I thought he played the character really well. I was very confused about the character's motivation,
Exactly.
but I didn't feel like that was a him
Him
problem.
No, that was the fact is you have after commercials and everything, I think you have like 42 minutes to tell a story and for a weekly episode to get enough background on what this guy is and why and how and try to cram it in.
Yeah.
It's just an impossibility. But I do like Eric Braeden. He's a very good actor.
He,
Now
I mean,
Well-
some of his early roles were that villain. I mean, he did play villains younger. I mean, and obviously.
I mean,
Victor-
he has the villain jaw
he
going
really
for
does.
him.
He just looked like he walked in our first our
As
the
soon as
first
you saw
scene,
him walking down the hallway,
Hallway.
I said, "Oh."
he has the fedora. He's gonna go like "Milady," then kill you.
Oh, I do have one other question that is directed specifically to you two. Was "dumb dumb" like a really super rude thing to say in the 70s? Because let me tell you, every time Kolchak gets really angry, he just calls people you dumb dumb, and it seems like he wants to say a different word at the end of dumb.
Well, the thing is that you couldn't say words that are now safe for TV. I mean, there's always been words that aren't safe for TV. You know, thank you, George Carlin, for defining those. But the words, but the thing is that insults that we would use as, you know, like words that are, for instance, adjectives and nouns and pronouns and everything else together, you know, we use those words quite, you know, in casual speech. I mean, even my young 21-year-old niece just used it a little earlier in the broadcast.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised.
Our YouTube channel is specifically flagged to not be watched by people under 18 because I don't know how to stop swearing.
Yeah,
Same.
no, it's okay.
I just don't understand. My daughter doesn't.
And you come by it honestly because I taught you all how to swear. I mean, it wasn't, you know.
My
Dad,
daughter uses
you're
that
the
every
first
word.
person that taught me how to swear when you said, when I got on my little 3-year-old ass, put my hands on my hips and goes, "Where's the effing screwdriver?" instead of a Phillips head or a flathead, because that's what you refer to as a screwdriver in the household on a regular basis.
Well,
Yeah, but you also, I don't know what's wrong with you because you were the one who just started calling people crack smokers at the age of like 2.
That's Jeffrey. Jeffrey was the one that told me to call grandma crack smoker, okay? And my 3-year-old ass listened.
and when I talked to my mother, she did, you know, she didn't so much mind that you called her a crack smoker. I mean, it wasn't, you know, she was a little bit, you know, it was a little odd for her. I mean,
I'm just trying to figure out how she was that young already knowing about crack.
Well, because here's the thing.
That's what you get growing up in Niagara Falls.
Every grandparent had a nickname, then there was
I
just Grandma Joe. And so Uncle Jeff was like, "Oh, just call her Grandma Crack Smoker." And because I knew she smoked cigarettes, so I was like, putting those two words together, Grandma Crack Smoker. That must be what she's smoking.
You know, our mother, God love her, she was confused about why you did call her crack smoker, But then she did it, and now she understands why.
Our mother never smoked crack. Don't
No,
believe.
no.
No, she never.
Actually, I do have a story to tell about our mother real quick, just because it's our mother, it's Father's Day. We're not going to be around our mother, but this actually happened last time we were all together at Christmas in North Carolina, the family. We were sitting around the fire. You were not there. We were sitting around the fire. Yes.
We were not invited.
Yeah, we weren't there.
Well, you were invited. You were in
I was in Thailand.
Thailand, okay, and you didn't come.
I had no way down.
But anyway, we were sitting around the fire, and we had some of that illegal green leafy marijuana around the fire, and I had the perfect opportunity.
It wasn't illegal. It was medicinal.
No, it wasn't illegal. It wasn't illegal.
I
It's
would
not.
say in both of the states
Oh.
that we are filming from, it is not a crime.
Oh, it's not illegal. So no.
It wasn't there. They went to the dispensary down there and got it, so it wasn't
Right.
illegal.
Right. So I had the opportunity to get my mother stoned on Christmas Eve.
Did you take it?
Me being the good son that I was, I didn't do it because I really would have felt bad if she would have like freaked out. But I'm like, here, I had the opportunity and I didn't.
She would have freaked out, and that was the thing, because she would have actually, the drug probably wouldn't have hurt her too much, or wouldn't hurt her at all. It's you know, but
The anxiety.
but when she found out that she smoked it, she would freak out. You know,
Yeah. Which would ensue a panic. That's
Oh,
why you just would have never should have
the
told her
anxiety.
until way after.
Oh
Like,
no,
hey,
because
Mom.
my problem was that even if she started to feel weird, and I
she
just
would
was
get all weird. So
Yeah,
you know,
she would,
it was
yeah.
a safe
She would.
bet. You know, she was. I mean, you know, mother's wonderful, but she's also 77 or 76 at the time. So we can't. You know, I mean, the fact is that she freaked out when she heard any of us did any of those things. And my brother, you know, my brother on the screen with us today, compared to the rest of us, he was a gardener compared to the rest of us.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You know, anyhow.
So the last thing we always like to do is I find it really fascinating to read the goofs and trivia on the IMDb page. There are 9 goofs.
Mm-hmm.
2 of them are continuity. Beginning with the fact that it was already mentioned the episode was filmed using a combination of the RMS Queen Mary, which you were right, it looked like the Queen Mary because it was, in the Los Angeles harbor, and the SS France in establishing shots. It wasn't mentioned that there was no attempt to rename the ship, but the name France remained visible on the stern of the vessel. Also that the Queen Mary has 3 stacks and the France had only 2 stacks and of substantially different appearance. Much of the action takes place on an upper deck where the different stacks are apparent. There doesn't seem to have been any attempt to hide the discrepancy.
Right, because in one
Unless
shot
they
I
knew
noticed
the other ship, I wouldn't have had any clue.
the names of the ships. I mean, I didn't. I knew it was the Queen Mary. It looked like in that series of ships from England. But I did see the shot where in one shot when they were doing a side pan, there was 1 stack, and then a bit little, and then they showed a different view, and there was 2, and I'm like,
Well, the one thing I wanted to say about the ship is when they shot the hallways when they were walking, it looked like a cruise ship, and when they were on the deck, it looked like a
utility
cargo
ship.
vessel, like they were taking containers. I mean, I know it was it didn't the outer deck, the way they had it was it didn't look like it was painted. It looked like it was just it didn't look like the Love Boat. It looked like a container ship.
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's probably, again, I'm not familiar with the SS France. I mean, the Queen Mary is obviously was very luxurious for its day. That's why the interior shots
Yeah.
all with like rich wood paneling.
That's my question was the Queen Mary out of commission, meaning like was it not sailing at this time? Because I know the Queen Mary got docked after a while, and I wonder if they did all their static shots, like all their stationary.
No, they were
stuff
saying
done.
the exterior boat shots were the other one. The
Interior
interior
was
shots were
Queen-
Queen Mary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I
Queen
kind of
Mary
figured.
was still operational. It was ported in LA, and so that's why it was able to be used for filming. They would block out, non-sailing
Right.
times
Yeah.
to do interiors because it was actually in either LA or Newport Harbor. I forget which one it was in, but I think it was LA. So
It was LA, yeah.
I want to go there because it's haunted as shit.
The next continuity error makes me laugh a lot. After the werewolf is dispatched, Kolchak says that when the old ship was scrapped, all evidence was scrapped along with her. But in the next scene, he's dictating the final details into his recorder while sitting on the dock with the ship behind him.
well,
They never said.
Well, maybe- well-
Smart man.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. I mean,
Yeah.
because I think sometimes like they'll use that scene where he's talking into the recorder saying that stuff. But I remember when he was saying that last scene, like at first they had him sitting on the harbor on the dock, but then they panned over the ship as it was sailing in the ocean, and he's sitting there saying, and when they scrapped the ship, they scrapped all the evidence with it. So that could have been something that they could have been showing a scene of like the last voyage of that ship and him talking about the story being like in the future sense of what was him telling that story after
that's kind of the continuity problem, is that he tells this narration as if the ship has been destroyed, but
Yeah.
but the thing is, there was no way for it to have been destroyed
If
in
it's
the,
right
in the
behind
hour
him.
after he got off of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Unless it was a set
even if
two
that-
happen thing.
Even if that wasn't the ship itself in the scene behind him, let's just say it wasn't the ship.
Yeah.
It's still, the problem is that there wasn't
He's in
enough
LA.
time. So
Yeah.
for him to make the commentary as like, I started right after I got off the boat, that's how his, because all of his frames are basically starting to tell you a story that he was never able to print.
Yeah.
Right.
They
So
would have
it's
been
hard to-
believable.
And
if he
usually
was
the
home.
opening scene and the ending scene are where he is. So like in the last episode when he flew to LA to do the vampire thing, the opening scene and the ending scene were on the airplane. Sometimes the opening scene and ending scene are on at his desk. But in this one, the opening scene and ending scene is him sitting on top of his suitcase waiting for the taxi to pick him up to go back to the airport. So in what way do they destroy the ship faster than the taxi picks him up?
Yeah.
There you go.
So that's, I mean, but I get it. I mean, it's again, that's a dialogue thing, and that's the
Yeah.
that's the challenge with again, this is a it goes back to some of the discussions about canon that we've talked about. This is an anthology show. It's not a linear progression of time,
Right.
even though it does have that kind of feature. Each
Yeah.
show stands really alone. There's the vampire show in the series obviously is a sequel to the vampire movie.
Right, but even in that, the timeline doesn't make sense because the vampire episode premiered a week before this one, but the vampire episode was supposed to be taking place in spring, and now we're back to Christmas.
Well, that's if you look at the way the shows are presented, they often will show the vampire sequel as the first episode, even though it was produced in a different order. So they show that one because it makes more sense logically, And again, as an anthology series, time is irrelevant. It's just convenience.
Yeah.
Right? So that's where that's the unfortunate challenge we have today, is that shows which do have relatively linear progression, where episodes are integrated, there's lots of potential for continuity errors. So like David mentioned Friends earlier. Friends is a show that had an anthology basis. It started out as just vignettes from life, but eventually it built into, because it lasted for a long time and there was a good integration, there became a linear feature to it that they weren't able to always recapture, so canon became irrelevant.
The same thing happened with Golden Girls. I remember because I actually sat and watched Golden Girls all the way through as if it was a series, not like a vignette show. And there was the thing that really bothered me that made me realize that canon was irrelevant for the show was in the first season, Rose and Blanche get into an argument about how Rose would never get plastic surgery and it's horrible. But then in the second season, there's an episode where they're stuck on a beach and Rose admits that she's had a nose job.
Right. And so that's again, and the thing is that there are some series where and again, my argument is that canon matters, especially in a linear progression type story where things come from one to the other.
Yes.
I mean, even soap operas like Dallas, or obviously soap operas on television, they're so long that they can kind of forget continuity because it's been 50 years since it started and they kind of forget some things. But other shows, you can't have JR being shot and then never being shot ever after that. He had to have been shot, and you can't pretend he wasn't shot in 3 years.
And that's why it's like, oh, it was, and if like, and how they fix that is that's just a dream. Never happened.
That was when they got rid of Patrick or Victoria Principal for a year.
Right, but
for a year, they had to wake him up in the shower.
But again, there are ways that these stories, especially long-running serials like Dallas, like those kind of things, that if they come into a situation where the story has to change for whatever reason, whether it's actor leaving, an actor coming back, this and that, the writers can, because of their the way the story is told, they can always go in and, like you say, throw a monkey wrench into something where you don't expect it, or so on and so forth. Like when JR was shot, it was the guesswork of who shot JR, and I'm sure, like everybody knows, Kristen shot JR, but I'm sure that there was discussion up until then. Well, if you never watched Dallas, but if you watched Dallas, Kristen shot JR. But I bet you when they did the I shot JR, I bet you they probably had 3 or 4 different scenarios of who shot JR until it actually made the right sense.
Yeah, well, they do that quite frequently when they're trying to prevent a reveal, and they do it actually more frequently now than they did in the past, to be honest, because we're too to use a wrestling phrase, like we're smart marks, right? Where a mark is a term for anybody that buys the fiction. So you buy into the fiction. You watch the show, you love the wrestling, you kind of half believe it's real, even though you kind of know it's not. But nowadays everybody is smart because we have the internet, and it's all a different story. So a lot of shows will actually have, especially if they do cliffhangers, they will shoot multiple possibilities and then decide, then release the one they want at the end, so that no one really knows the truth. Now, again, going back to the whole thing, Kolchak's an anthology. Okay, yeah. There's no linear progression that makes sense, because like you said, there was an episode that was spring, and then there's an episode at Christmas. Yeah. Right, and they're right next to each other. So because they're not, you don't actually also know the time. The problem is that the show doesn't have a time reference.
Except that it does, because in every one of his monologues, Kolchak tells you the date and time of an attack.
Does he tell you the year, though? He just tells you the.
No, he tells you the month, day, year, time.
Oh, really? I don't remember seeing the date part.
But do his month. So obviously, if you watch the show, the month, day, and time don't coincide with the episodes of the show.
Well, that's the thing, is they had up until they jumped ahead to spring and then jumped back to Christmas. The first 3 were all in the fall of 1974, and then they jumped ahead to the spring and then jumped back to Christmas.
And for me, I just kind of take it as, like, I don't look at it as him that we're going along with him through all of these. In my head, it's like he's already experienced all of these vignettes, and now we're hearing him.
No, and I understand that part of it. I just. You can't.
It's
hard
to always be like that little pesky.
It's hard to jump ahead and then back and then ahead. And
what did he go in the vampire episode? Did they go to the spring of 75, or did they go back to the spring of 74?
I don't remember actually.
Check
but
that
either
out.
way, it's jumping wildly out of the time that they were
again,
in.
So then what I would suggest to you, to really just put it all out of your mind is don't pay attention to when it happens.
Well, welcome to the things that me and Mary.
Because again, these are just his stories. I mean, these are like look at it this way. So instead of calling it Kolchak the Night Stalker, call it Kolchak, Cases from the Night Stalker, which means that the stories that he's portraying to you are stories that he's already done, and he's basically writing the story.
So, like I said, yeah, because that's the whole thing. It's not a linear story. It's like reading his autobiography or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, but again, we haven't talked a lot about we talked a lot about the overview of the episode, but you know, I guess some of the things like we can probably move towards wrapping up. I know we've been on here for a while. But I guess the one thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about with David was just the environment and the times that it was shot at. We've talked a lot about criticizing certain filming and those things, which are easy to do. But again, this show is relevant and relative to 1975 or 4 and the era that it was shot in. You know, it was scandalous, okay, to go on a swingers boat cruise.
Sure. Yep.
I mean, that was not, you know, that was like.
I do have to say I have notes about the fact that Tony's first vacation in 5 years is to a swingers boat cruise. That made me laugh so much.
See,
but the funny thing about it was he was there going to tell a story about the boat being decommissioned, which was, you know, and I don't know how it ended up being a swingers cruise. That's again a plot question I had.
Right.
Too,
well,
you know?
you see, now this is the thing that I was going to get to, and I was going to ask you guys about, because, you know, you talked about how IMDb or whatever it is gave this a 7.8 out of whatever. And so because you haven't watched because you guys haven't watched the entire series. So you're watching it. You're watching it show by show by show. And George, you didn't remember this one. This wasn't a memorable one. But what I think you're going to find out, and to me, because I've been watching them and you know, to refresh my memory, but the one thing you're going to find out that I think people like about this episode is really it's the beginning 10 minutes. It's showing the true relationship between Kolchak and Tony, and how Kolchak, like, went from the time that phone rang and Tony had to take that call to basically maneuvering himself to get on that boat. And getting himself to take over that cruise, and just knowing how he can manipulate Tony to the point where Kolchak will basically tell him no, to the point where Tony's like, "You're going to go and do it," because
we talked a lot about that last week because he did that to Kolchak, or to Tony, to go to LA for the vampire thing. Kolchak and Tony's relationship is by far my favorite part of the show.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the thing that people, when they look at the show, I mean, we can pick it apart from the makeup to this to that, but I think the one thing people, when they watched that show back then, like, I think that it was always, because there were shows on TV at the time, like there was All in the Family, so it was Archie Bunker and Meathead, and there was like the Jefferson, or not the Jeffersons, but Sanford and Son. So like when you asked about the word dummy, well, in Sanford and Son, that's what Fred would call Lamont. You big dummy. I mean, and so it was like, so that word was not so. In that era, in that time, you always had the like irascible boss and his. It's like the Peter Parker and J. Jonah Jameson type of relationship, and so in those shows, that's what people watched, and so it wasn't so much about a werewolf or this or that. It was actually the interpersonal relationships that.
Oh, for sure. Like Kolchak's relationship with Tony, Kolchak's dialogue with whatever girl he's talking to that week, like that is the meat of the show.
The horror or the suspense elements, you know, help the show. Okay, and some episodes do it better than others, right? So we know this one wasn't tremendously suspenseful. Okay, because the monster issues and all that. However, like you said, the dialogues, the there's three things that happen in a show. Okay, or four. Let me use four. There's the Tony Kolchak dynamic. There's the Kolchak law enforcement or authority dynamic.
Yes.
There's the Kolchak girl dynamic, and then there's the how does he figure out the answer.
Yeah.
Right? So those are the four things that are happening in each episode.
Yeah.
And again, it's not you kind of get to like, even if it's very similar all the time, exactly how Tony and Kolchak are going to act, exactly how the cop is going to act against him. Okay, because nobody.
And I think that is a credit to the writers, because I mean Jeffrey Rice's characters of the original book, the Kolchak story.
Yeah.
Is these dynamics, and that is great. And I know that from everything that I've read, Darren McGavin put a lot of his own personal touch into who Kolchak was. But to the writer's credit, despite the fact that we know that there's that formulaic element where there's going to be a Tony Kolchak fight, a Tony law enforcement fight, we know that the dialogue never isn't interesting. It never isn't funny. His one-liners, his wit are always still good. Like a lot of my notes most of the time when I'm watching it are just about the stupid things he says. Like when Tony said, they're coming. And Kolchak said, what, the British? Or like when he needed to go see the captain of the ship and the guy said, we have to go see your dad. He said, I don't have a dad.
Yeah.
Like it's just that I think that no matter what, when it comes down to the show, the things that I will never have an issue with is the dynamics that the characters have within each other. It's just something that I think will always make the show memorable to the people who have watched it and to the people who start watching it because they listen to the podcast and they want to watch it. There will be that little dynamic that almost gives you that nostalgic feeling, especially if you do enjoy watching old 70s TV.
One thing that Monica and I have talked about, we've discussed whether or not we are going to do the Kolchak reboot at the end of this, just to see how it carried over. And I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it, because I think part of the charm of Kolchak's character is the same thing that I felt when I was watching Columbo, and like the kind of having to do it all yourself. Like in the radio room when Kolchak was trying to figure out what the message that they were sending on the ship was, and he had to take out his notepad and write down the notes that he saw and like try to get out of there fast enough. I literally made a note about like, what would Kolchak be like if he had a camera phone?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like having to do that is like, I think...
I would recommend not, by the way. I actually watched the first 3 episodes of the new Kolchak, and it was very disappointing. I mean, it didn't even last 13 episodes, I don't think.
Yeah.
Because it just didn't capture it. It wasn't Kolchak. It was a guy named Kolchak, but it wasn't Kolchak.
I think the saddest part of this whole thing, and this was something that my wife told me that I wasn't privy to, or I just didn't realize at the time, but I think the saddest part is that Darren McGavin basically, gave up after the first season. I mean, he bought himself out of his contract. I mean, he didn't want to do Kolchak anymore for whatever reason. I don't know the exact reason, but I mean, I just really thought that this show itself had that opportunity to evolve into something more. And I don't know the exact reasons.
While I agree, and as from a fan's perspective, I would have wanted to see it run longer, but I think there's something to be said where there's always the fear when you're an actor of getting stuck in a box. And like, while he did go on to do many other things in his career, Peter Falk will always be Columbo. That is who he is. That association is never going to go away. He did it for, after the movies came out, it was a total of like 25 years that he was playing this character. And that's what he's always going to be associated with. And it's not to say that his career didn't continue, but were Darren McGavin to have done Kolchak for as long as Peter Falk did Columbo, there's always that box that he might have felt that he was never going to get out of.
Yeah.
And the one thing from like I said, when we watched it originally, those things never really occurred to us. We didn't look at it from the business of film or movies or TV. But honestly, the one thing about an actor, and this is something I've heard, and I tend to believe it because, again, that's, I don't go to work and be a, and go, and today today I'm the director of operations. Tomorrow I'm going to be the guy that digs the hole. 3 days from now I'm going to be the guy that, fixes the truck. I'm going to drive a truck. I don't do those things. I have a job. My job is to be a director of operations of a construction company. His job is to be an actor. His job is not to be Kolchak.
Right.
Kolchak is what he played for some length of time. And most actors, they don't go to work at Kolchak because it's going to be a career. Because if you're an actor, you want to act. And if you're just being Kolchak for a while, it gets stale for you as a thing because, again, it's a paycheck. But a lot of actors, especially if they're talented and they're capable, they want different opportunities.
Right.
That's
it's
where
definitely
the
true.
kind of comes in, So like I said, a guy like Ron, okay, Ron, his associate there.
Oh yeah, Ron Updike.
Ron Updike. Is that the character's name?
That's the character's name, yeah.
I mean, he had a great line in this movie, in this show too, about why was he going to the doctor? Because the vitamins were making him sick, right?
Yeah, the vitamins were making him sick.
But he doesn't have a huge resume,
Right.
that I'm aware of, and I don't,
No, he doesn't really.
And the reason why is that he needed a job. He wasn't a dynamic actor. He wasn't a star. So for him, it's those level of actors that like Sirius to go on as long as they can, because that's where they make money there. They don't jump from everything because they're not,
And as a fan who doesn't understand the business side of acting, it's always harder because like this last year or two on Grey's Anatomy, just for an example, Grey's Anatomy is now ending its 17th season. So it's been on TV for most of my life. So a few of the major actors who have been on the show, for one of them who's been on the show since episode 1 and another one who's been on the show since probably season 5 or 6, both left the show this year. And the fans were outraged. The internet was a disgusting place because they left the show. But like for one of them, he's been on the show since season 1, episode 1. He's a father of 5 in his 50s, and he's been playing the same character on TV for the last 20 years. And he's like, I love it, but I am not Alex Karev. I am Justin. I am a person. I have a family. I've made a great name. I've made a lot of money. I can take care of my kids. I can do everything I wanted to do. I need to walk away now for myself.
Well, again, you're absolutely right. And again, I guess things being relative, back in the time, like in the 70s, in that era of TV, and before that, I don't know how it is now. Some yes, but a lot of these actors, like the character actors, like the guys who are the guest stars, like the one that, whatever his name was, the one who has very little credits or whatever.
Yeah.
Those guys are basically Screen Actor Guild union card guys who are contracted to Paramount. So if there's a show and you want to get like $250 an episode to go play Jim, the guy who's washing the window, you're going to go do that. And so a lot of those kind of actors are contracted. And even like a Darren McGavin, okay, he could have been contracted to whatever company made that show, if it was Paramount or whatever, and maybe his contract was coming up and he didn't want to renew it, or maybe they didn't want to renew it. But from what Stacy told me, it was his decision to move on from the show, and he probably didn't want to get typecasted.
Probably. I think it probably was a lot of his own decision, because I also have read things that some of the production direction staff from early episodes in the movies did not continue because Darren was not a pleasant person to work with.
Well, it could have been.
And
I
that's
mean,
true.
again, as a serious actor, if you are, see, there's some actors who demand, and I don't mean demand like, but they want perfection. They want their roles to be meaningful because they believe that they've poured their heart and soul into their career and what they're doing. And if you are an actor and you're doing like we sat here basically for 2 hours and basically ripped apart this werewolf thing because of the makeup, this and that. So if we see that as people watching the show and as people giving feedback to these shows, imagine the actor who puts his sweat and life into making these shows and realizes that, what the hell am I trying to do here? Am I being a serious actor, or am I being being a court jester in the middle of a thing? So at some point, it's probably like, this just isn't for me.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, and just real quick, Monica, and then I'll let you jump in, but that's the thing is that, the one thing we have to be careful of is that to appreciate the acting for what it is. And I think that's kind of where we were getting at with the, dialogue itself is a very helpful tool, but dialogue itself does not make the visual work. Okay.
Right.
The dynamic between, like I said, the acting between, Tony and Carl, is the thing that makes, Simon
Oakland and Darren McGavin. Yeah.
Their acting is what sells that. Those words are good, but their delivery, their method, their visuals,
yes,
their back and forth. Darren McGavin is a good actor. I mean, he doesn't. I mean, he's not. I can't say that I've seen a far range in his work over time because, even Kolchak, which is not a comedy, is somewhat comedic.
Yeah,
okay?
I've really only seen him playing the witty comedy dad.
Yeah, I mean, because again, he played that in Billy Madison. He played the dad in Christmas Story, and I don't know all the rest of his roles. I mean, you see him pop up in a handful of things from time to time. But those are these are the three roles he's mostly known for, and again, modern audiences probably only know him more from Christmas Story because it's played all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They even forget that he was in Billy Madison, right? Yeah. But that whole dynamic is the acting is helpful. I mean, not all the acting in the show is good because it's an ensemble cast. It has guest stars every week, so you have some continuity with having acting dynamic, But the dynamic that is good is the relationships you see continuing, because one thing about the acting is that we don't have the same cop every week or the same authority figure, but we have the same relationship. Yes. So that's why so it's like we don't care who the guy is, though each of them have a different thing. Inspector Luger from Barney Miller, which was a couple weeks ago, and then
Mr. Feeney last week.
Feeney from last week. But those are the things where the character himself is what Carl plays off of, because it's the authority guy. So he's got that dynamic. Carl never does anything different with that. How the guy reacts to him may be different or approach, but it's the same dynamic.
Now my only thing is that I have just realized we have been recording for 2 hours.
Yeah, no, when your dad said we've been talking for 2 hours, I was going to say, speaking of that, we should probably
because I think this will be our second longest episode, because our first episode obviously was pretty lengthy, but
I mean, I don't mind it being 2 hours, but
the only thing I just want to say, and again, 2 hours is a long time, but one of the things I just wanted to kind of wrap up on, because we talked a little bit about it, but why did we recommend this to you? Why did what's the real reason why we suggested this? And I think that, David, that gets to the context of us. We did not watch Kolchak first run, okay, because in 1974 when it came out, David was 5 and I was 7.
Yeah.
And so Joanne, our wonderful mother, was not going to let us stay up to 10 o'clock on whatever weeknight it was on 10. It was at the late show. It was the 10 o'clock
Yeah,
show.
I mean, based on the content and it being the 70s, I can't imagine that it was on at 7 o'clock. Like,
No, it was the last show of the night because networks were very specific, and this was the kind of content that would have been run at the 10 o'clock, maybe the 9 o'clock hour, depending on, but it was typically the 10 o'clock hour.
Yeah.
On the channel that it was broadcast on originally.
Right.
When we watched it, it was probably 3 to 4 years later. So we were a little older.
77, I believe.
It was 77, 78 is when we actually started watching it, and it was showed on the late Friday night rerun for the Scary Movie night. So they would run like scary movies, then they would run Kolchak for the 20 episodes, then I would go back to scary movies, and so it was that kind of late night. When we were a little older and a little bit less supervised because our parents got divorced, so we were a little less supervised, and hate to say it that way, but we were,
And again, the thing that made it special, and the reason why I remember this, the reason that Kolchak was always vivid in my mind. Okay, again, it wasn't any of the show. I mean, there were certain episodes, like you guys are going to watch one. It's called Chopper, and that's my favorite episode.
Yeah.
This episode has a lot
I'll
more
just give you a
know.
little teaser, folks.
isn't it gonna suck if we watch it and hate it?
No, you won't.
You might hate it, but because it wasn't,
it wasn't. But
the practical effects
those of you
who
watch their podcast and are watching this, if you want to study the legend of Sleepy Hollow, then you understand Chopper. So just but check that out. But to me, again, for just my memories and what it was to me, I look at you two sitting up in the top of that screen, Mary Kate and Monica, cousins. Okay? And I say that because when we would watch this most of the time, we were with our cousins.
Yeah.
The Braun kids, Greg Braun, Mike Braun, Paul Braun, on Friday nights, especially in the summertime, but on Friday nights, most times, either they'd spend the night or we'd spend the night, and that was our ritual. It would, at nighttime, we'd be at the Braun's house on their living room floor, all had the blankets out, and we'd be watching Friday night shows, whether it was Starsky and Hutch, and then it would come to Kolchak, and we would watch it, and it would just be that childhood memory of just enjoying your family, enjoying your time together, and doing those things that, and it just became a routine, and it was just something that you always remember.
Now,
Exactly.
the one thing I'm going to say that will honestly probably get a little bit sappy because that's what I do. With knowing that we're doing our 49th episode and we're 3 episodes away from hitting 1 whole year that we've been doing this stuff, and when Mary Kate texted me, I want to do a podcast, I was like, sure, figuring when she comes home, we're going to be doing this awesome podcast. Great. Can't wait to plan it. 2 weeks later, she's like, okay, I have Zoom and we're going to get on Zoom. We're going to record all this stuff. And I was like, and then we just took off from there. And I mean, I love all my cousins, but for me and Mary Kate, I think especially from when we were basically the same person. So we just simply hated each other. To now, both of us, Mary Kate, she's my cousin, yes, but she's my sister. That's something that I have with her that I don't think that I'll ever, be able to replace. She's helped me with a lot of advice and helped me also become a lot of who I am today by just saying, do it.
In all actuality for myself, and I know your podcast is called Death and Aliens, but if it was really called Death and Drama, it wouldn't have surprised me either.
Well, fun fact, not only do I love sci-fi, but the Tokyo Hotel fan group, we're called Aliens. So don't think I didn't have ulterior motives.
Right, and put it this way, the drama that I'm talking about is not like movie drama. I'm just talking about my daughter and my niece.
Yeah.
I think the drama that happens with us, I think, just relies on how much we both mutually hate other people.
And again, just and kind of talking about what David said, there was a nostalgia for us of the era, right? It was a time where we were young, we were growing up, we had all sorts of things happening in our lives, and that was the advent of TV was not a new thing in the 70s, obviously, but color TV was kind of new, and cable TV was even newer. I mean, was new. Cable TV came around, and all of those things that are like, pop culture became a real fixture for us. We obviously didn't see a lot of first run shows, but a lot of the shows that are prevalent today, like the Gilligan's Island and the Dick Van Dyke Show and My Three Sons, and so many of those comedies that are ingrained in people's hearts today. We live them every day because we saw Gilligan's Island at 3:00 in the afternoon, followed by the Brady Bunch, and not first time, but that was in syndication, and we were just that generation that grew up with the first concepts of syndication. So all the shows that happened in the 20 years before, in TV, we grew up with, so that became part of our lives. Having afternoon, when we got home from school, you did your homework, but then you started watching television, and it's, we were the first video game generation, really. We had all the things that are pop culture staples today. We were the first generation to even have those.
So what you're saying is you're old.
We're saying that
I'll tell you this much, Mary Kate. We're so old. We were the first house on our block to have MTV, and that's
wow.
That's the truth.
We had MTV on day one, and for that entire 2 years that MTV was really videos, we had more people at our house every day than you could shake a stick at.
And that's a fact.
So, and the thing is, your grandmother, girls, who she was a single mom at the time, and
she
worked. But the thing is that she respected us, and we actually were pretty good. And she actually liked the fact that we weren't traversing the universe to find, get up to mischief. We were at our house, and we were there, and our friends were there, and she knew all of our friends. Most of our friends to this day still call her mom. I have friends.
There were days, and it's not a lie, there would be 20, 25 kids sitting in the living room. She would come home from work, and we're all just watching on TV. Just all camped out, and you know what? She never had to worry about, are we doing drugs? Are we getting in trouble? And she could go to work and never have to worry about it. Now, whether we told her all that stuff or not, that's a story. But the fact is,
it took him a little bit. He got a little bit older before he got a little bit happy. But anyhow.
Right. But again, the fact is that she never had to worry about those things because.
And again, where Kolchak fits in this for us is, like I said, like David said, it's nostalgia, but it's also the advent of things that we had never seen or experienced before. We were coming of age ourselves, but Kolchak was a suspenseful show, especially when you're young. And it's not so much of the visuals per se, but it's the suspense that's caused by music and clips, right? And the way the music is the theme song itself starts so melodic and so pretty, and then it has that switch to the drum beat, right?
I don't know if I will ever get over the first time I heard that theme song.
Yeah.
So that's meaningful, okay, to us. And then you follow that up in the years that followed, from a horror suspense. That's when real, there was horror movies. You call the Universal monster movies horror pictures, but they weren't really. They were more like the suspense of Kolchak.
Yeah.
The horror came in when you had Halloween come out, and then when and then again, going back to the idea of what we did with our cousins is we watched those shows, but then we tried to scare the hell out of each other, right? So then we watched like Phantasm, which actually added the first level of gore. Most times, most horror back then wasn't gory. Today gore in movies is so visual, it's commonplace.
Well, today there is no horror movie.
It's so desensitizing, and that's where I have a lot of my issues. And that's when I find a good horror movie, I appreciate the hell out of it, because that's a very hard feat to have.
And so, like I said, we did those movies. They were suspenseful, but they started with the gore, but they were still, the way they did it was mostly, wasn't usually too abject, again, the first movie that was ever abjectly gore that we watched, because I don't think we ever got into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre world or anything like that, but was Phantasm.
Mm-hmm.
So Phantasm was the first movie that had gore, where where people were actually being like their brains were being sucked out of their heads,
Yeah.
But
rough.
the thing is, the stuff that scared us was not that. The stuff that scared us was the character and the way the character was evil.
Yeah.
And and again, so that was one of those times when I actually tortured your brother or your father, my brother, because of horror.
Well, and that again, that's the thing. It's like, when you look at the movies and you look at the horror movies, what really makes a horror movie? If you sat in a theater and you watched a guy in a Halloween mask walking behind somebody, are you scared? You're not scared until they play that music, until the da 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 da. When you
I
start
don't
to
cry
hear
this
that.
time now, Dad.
Or no, but those, it's what's added. I mean, if you strip away a movie from the music and all the and you
The
just
mood setting.
it's
I don't know. I think even with no music, The Ring would be terrifying.
That's fair. And same thing with Hereditary. Hereditary, that's a current horror movie that came out. There is no music. That shit, one of the scariest horror movies that has come out with the last.
The thing is, for me, over time, I've become very anti-horror. I'm not a big horror guy anymore. When we were younger, they came out. There was some real suspense and scariness. I don't find that. I find most of it is all gore gags and things like that. I don't. There are some that are good. I've heard things like the Quiet Place.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hear good things about it, but I don't know.
It's a good story. When that movie came out, it was just a lot of ill-timed movie because Bird Box.
Yeah, but
also
Bird Box
came
was
out
terrible.
That also did suck. But
So
the one thing I am gonna say, even though I really, really love that we have done this, I'm not feeling super great. So.
Well, again, thank you for having us on. We were really, again, we're happy for you, and we're excited about the direction of the show and where where we hope we can take it and then continue to improve it. And we'll have no problem if you ever want us to visit again, whether it's on Kolchak or on something else. I mean, for God's sake, don't do Hemlock Grove again or something like that.
You don't have to do that.
No. I know you won't do it again, but that was a show that's so modern, and I guess I've been killed in that world because of like the trash that was Twilight.
No.
I'm sorry, it's
Listen,
trash.
I was just about to go on this.
we were going to talk about how much we loved you,
Yeah.
but you decided to
Slander Twilight's
so
the name
we're
of
going
this
to
house.
end this podcast. Thank you very much. Happy
I would
Father's
like
Day.
to-
Sparkly
Wait, I would like to
people.
say-
I don't get that. What's the sparkly thing?
I just want to say to everybody out there, happy Father's Day.
That's true. Happy Father's Day to everybody.
And I want to thank my daughter and my niece for having me on this show. It's been my pleasure. Again, anytime you'd like to spend 2.5 hours talking about anything,
You'll do it.
We are more than happy to come on and talk to you all. I suggest, $6 Million Man, Brady Bunch, Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
Imagine the take on Brady Bunch as an alien and death movie. Think about that. What's the psychology of that?
If you edit some scenes pretty weirdly, you might get something.
You can make anything a horror movie
Okay,
with the right
I want
music.
to tell you, okay, the Grand Canyon episode with Vincent Price being down there, that'd be a good episode to discuss on Death and Aliens. I mean,
And there
Vincent Price is
was the totem, and there was the Hawaii.
Oh, the
Evil
Hawaii
Totem
one. That
episode.
is very true. That is true.
And
You guys can
Vincent
try
Price-
all you want. I'm
We're
not
not
doing the
watching.
Brady Bunch
Yeah,
on
we're
this
not
show.
Vincent Price is the master of horror.
I'm
Yes, and
fully
he was on the
aware.
Brady Bunch.
I'm fully aware of Vincent Price and all of his contributions to the horror world.
It'd be like me asking her to watch Edward Scissorhands on
Well,
here because Vincent
no.
Price is in it.
No,
Well, we could
I'm
watch.
sorry.
You
There's
could look at
lots of
the
things that
hilarious
are-
House of Frightenstein.
And
Oh,
goth,
Hilarious House of Frightenstein.
whatever. No.
But
anyhow.
real quick on our end, well, at least for me, It's I know like Mary Kate, when we were in office, she's gonna be able to get to go hang out with her dad. I obviously mine's all the way shipped out in Arizona, so like rude, but like fine, I guess. So I don't normally get to spend Father's Day with my dad, so being able to do something like this does mean a lot to me, and I'm glad that you were able to be a part of it.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies. We really do appreciate you and love where you are. And, we're proud to be your dads, too.
Absolutely. You keep up the good work.
All right.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
I know.
Bye.
First of all, I just want to apologize for having such a long episode this week, but as you can see by watching our fathers, we come by our talking way too fucking much, honestly.
Yeah, as you can see, we get our commentary abilities for our dads. I just executed the fact that I get my commentary abilities from my father.
Yeah, you can definitely, even if you didn't know which one is which, you can see whose dad is whose, because my dad talks as much as I do, and Monica's dad is almost as dumb as she is.
I learned from the best. Told you.
But thank you for sticking through that with us. If you made it this far, please like, subscribe, comment, I don't know, whatever you do when you like people on the internet.
Yeah.
Beats me. You can follow us on I do that every time. I always say on death. You can follow us on That was my sister. I hate her. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Death and Aliens. You can follow me on everything at EMKAY_superstar.
You can follow me on Instagram at Monica.Lynn_, and you can follow me on Twitter at Mon_Lynn_. It's a rough night. It's okay.
It's been hours. But thank you, and we will see you guys next week.
Bye.